And we saw some of you didn't do your work.
We're going to get you. We're going to get you to go do that work.
Now.
Because, and if you haven't done it, stop, because the next part won't make any sense if you didn't do the work.
Well, it'll make sense, but unfortunately it's to make the wrong kind of sense, and that's the whole point of having the experience. So please have the experience.
It'll make sense. It'll make pennies instead of dollars.
That's it.
So just pause it, go do the work.
And we're about dollars, are you?
We're about lots of dollars. All right. For those of you that did do it, good. Keep doing that. The more you do these exercises, the more you're going to get really proficient at eliciting people's criteria. And I doubt that you've met people who have been working in Kenrick's mentoring program. But if you have, these people are slick. They do it effortlessly. I mean, heck, these guys could get criteria out of a corpse. And they're just that good. And it comes because of practice. And it comes because of elegance. So just keep doing what you're doing. Now, criteria are so powerful, and everybody thinks of criteria as typically something that you want. You want freedom, you want security, you want success. You want to be success is unstoppable, as we talked about before. But there's also a flip side of criteria. There are things that people don't want. As we changed the tape, Kenrick and I had a discussion about someone that really highlights this. And that discussion is someone whose number one criteria is freedom. And with their number one criteria being freedom, freedom means not having to do anything that they don't want to, not having to keep a schedule, not being responsible for anything. And then Kenrick pointed out, well, do they want to get a check?
Right. They want freedom as long as the check's still there. They don't want to have to do anything nor anything for the check.
Okay. So here what you have is two things that are of ultimate importance to them. Number one, they want freedom, but they also want to live well. And the two of them are conflicting with one another. It's kind of like the Stephen Wright joke about the humidifier and the dehumidifier going at one another all night to see who was going to be the winner. And when you have two criteria that conflict, what does that produce?
A person without congruity.
Okay. And what would be some of the things, would you say that this person would be efficient or inefficient?
Inefficient. They'd be efficient when they need the check and inefficient all the rest of the time.
Okay. Which is a pretty dead-on reading of the way this person lives their life, because their criteria aren't in alignment. Now, a lot of the people that you are working with are going to have a conflict of criteria. We spoke about positive criteria, but there's another side of criteria that we're really discussing now for the first time, and that's what we've called negative criteria. What is it that your clients don't want?
And by the way, this is really fascinating, because so much has changed in this seminar from what I used to do. For example, you know, I have laughed at people who have talked about eliciting negative criteria as opposed to positive, or as opposed to just letting the people go whichever way they want. But as I've learned and grown, wow, the great thing with negative criteria is it is a genuine lever. It really moves people. A positive criteria can also be a really good lever, but it's generally not as fast or as efficient as a negative criteria. So if you can get both, or if you happen to have the negative, or they happen to express the negative, this is not a bad thing. This is a really good thing.
Okay. So let's say, just for example, you're a therapist and you're working with people. And one of the people that you're working with is someone who is really lazy about going out there and finding a job and just bouncing around and so forth. And one of the things that they are most afraid of is that they're not going to meet the right person to marry. Okay? That's something that that's a negative criteria of theirs. It's not that they are looking forward to marrying the right person. I'm not saying that this is not part of what they're doing. There's obviously a positive criteria, but there's an even stronger negative criteria of not meeting the right person. Now remember, they don't want to have a job. They just want to bounce around. Now if you connect the fact that they're not having a job is going to reinforce that they are not desirable, and therefore women aren't going to want to get serious with them and aren't going to want to marry them because they don't have a job, and women are looking for that kind of security, that someone who's going to be able to build a nest, you will get them to move a lot faster than trying to explain the positives of being a hardworking member of society. Okay? So pushing that negative is a very, very powerful step. How do you think you identify a person's negative criteria? It doesn't come from thinking about it. It comes from talking to them about it. It comes from analyzing it. And when you find a person's negative criteria and you push that button, get out of the way, because you're going to get a response. Okay? Now, people who are effective in sales, who are effective in persuasion, know the power of negative criteria. And sometimes if you've identified it, all it takes is just mentioning it, and you're going to get a response. Don't be afraid of the response. Okay? So someone comes up with a really brilliant idea, and they haven't thought of a negative consequence. When you say to them, well, I guess such and such consequence isn't important to you, which is their negative criteria, watch for them. They're not just going to sit quietly. This is like taking a dagger and sticking it in their back. They're going to have to respond. They're not just going to go, oh, that's a really interesting idea. They're going to get up out of their seat, and they're going to be moved and motivated by this. They're not going to take it lying down. So you need to keep this in mind of, you may be surprised at what you get. Let's see, can we come up with an example along that line of, don't think of the pink elephant, but a negative criteria that someone would have. Okay, I came up with one, and that is, some people have a negative criteria is that they never want to lose face. Okay? Mm-hmm. They're very concerned about their image. And on the other hand, there are some people who don't care about their image.
Or caring about their image might mean something different.
Right. Okay. So, I have friends who are so laid back that no matter what you say to them, you can't possibly insult them because they're on this low level, nothing. They don't care about their image. They're so happy with where they are, you can't say anything to them. I do a lot of yoga, and I work with yoga teachers. Yoga teachers are really unusual because they really don't care about financial success. They care about teaching yoga. They care about, like spreading the love and joy throughout the world and being wonderful that way. But making money is not really high on their priority list. That's why most yoga teachers are really poor. So if you try and use money as a negative criteria, which it isn't for them, you don't get much of a response. So if you say something like, well, I guess you don't care that by taking 6 months off and living in an ashram someplace, you're not going to be able to pay your bills, they'll say something like, well, the universe will provide for me. Okay? Now, on the other hand, if you're dealing with someone who has a 9-to-5 job and they've used up all their vacation days, and their wife says, you know what, honey, I think you should take 2 weeks off your job and we should just go away. And the wife doesn't care. But then you point out to her, well, if you do that, we won't have the money to buy that piece of furniture you want. Watch how quickly, if that's something that she wants, watch how quickly her attitude changes. So you need to identify what people want. Now, yesterday I had this unusual situation where I was in a restaurant, and the people in the restaurant is the kind of restaurant where they do a repetitive task again and again. Actually, it was a Dunkin' Donuts, and during the breakfast rush, you can't imagine how in a regular Dunkin' Donuts how many people pay the cashier, and it's just this automatic doing and doing. They're in a trance state, okay? And so I gave the woman the money, and she put it in the drawer, and she just stared at me. And I said, can I have my change? And it didn't register on her that she had to give the change because she was in her own trance. I went to go get my bagel and cream cheese, and the person who gave it to me was also in a trance. No thank you, no enjoy, no whatever. They were just totally wrapped up in their trance. And people who are wrapped up in a trance are not being clear and congruent with who they are. You have to interrupt their trances. We're going to be coming back to that again in the seminar. Let me tie it into people's criteria. When people are going through a trance, people are living their lives in a trance, they aren't aware of whether or not they are approaching their criteria or whether or not they are actually bringing about something in their lives that they don't want. As the persuader, as being what we call being the adult in the room, you have to make them aware of whether they are coming close to what they want or they are actually bringing what they don't want into existence. And the more you do that and the more congruent you are, the better you're going to be. So, go ahead.
Now let me tie it into the big picture, because you've heard about negative criteria and positive criteria. How can we use this covertly? So I want to give you a little tip. I'm talking to a group of people, and Harlan's in the group of people. And I know because I've talked to Harlan before, you were party to it, what is something that Harlan wants. So I'm talking to this group of people, and I say, for example, I know that as you listen to what I say, you're wanting to get a certain result from using these skills powerfully. And in fact, when you use the skills with real strength, one of the things that you want to happen is you want to see, you want to hear, you want to know the result that you're getting. Because really, success is about being unstoppable. Now, one of the things, because I know that there's people that want to become more unstoppable in the room. So today I'm going to talk about ways to do that. Now tell me, in today's presentation, in the way I'm talking with you right now, who said unstoppable first? Me. I did. Yes, earlier for demonstration I asked Harlan and he told it to me. But now as I give you this demonstration, I'm the one saying it. How's it affecting him? Did you see him smile?
I'm smiling, I'm connected. I'm actually, if you were paying attention to what was going on, Kenrick changed his tonality from his speaking tonality to his hypnotic voice tonality, and I was going right along with it. If you go back and replay that section, and you pick up Kenrick's tonal shift, I want you to go back and I want you to watch my eyes, because I felt my eyes beginning to go. Okay? So go back and re-watch that again. Watch the combination of his using the altered tonality and my criteria.
And if it were you doing this, and it will be very quickly, if you were doing this, how would you know what criteria to use? Because in the eliciting of the criteria that you just did with 4 or 5 people, remember that? Okay, you've amalgamated this criteria. You know what your audience wants.
Now, there are a lot of people who persuade and persuade in groups.
That's what I'm talking about.
And when you persuade in groups, a lot of people have told, oh, well, you know, tell a joke to get people's attention. Okay? And they even, in presentations that are written for you, they put in these corny jokes that you say. I'm going to suggest that if you want their attention from the beginning, instead of the corny joke, by studying your group and asking the questions and finding out their criteria and their negative criteria, if you ask a negative criteria question to the entire group, I guarantee that you will have their attention. If you've done your homework and you found out the criteria of most of the people in your group, in your target market, and you build your presentation about hitting that criteria, even though you're working in a group, they will be drawn and connected the same way I was in the one-on-one situation. There's no difference except that there are going to be more criteria at stake.
Now, you've heard it said that the greatest learning you can ever have is that which you come upon in your own mind. And with your permission, I'd like to lead you to a learning right now. And I want to do that by sharing an experience Harlan and I have had together. As we were listening to this teacher that Harlan talked about when we began, the teacher would watch the room, and he would say something like this. You know, I was working with a client the other day. It was a woman, very intelligent woman, and I knew that she'd been raped. And as we talked, now, as he said those words, what was he doing, Harlan?
He was scanning the audience.
And he knew who had been raped in that audience by how they were responding. Who said the word rape? The audience or him?
He did.
He did. He named the criteria, but he watched to see the reactions. Then he'd go on and say, and of course, you know, when one of my clients was young, they diagnosed him with a learning disability. Now, it wasn't horrible, but I guess he probably thought it was. And as he watched, he could tell who had learning disabilities. Here's something that he would then do. He'd say, Harlan, I'd like you to go sit over here, if you wouldn't mind, to be a little closer so I can see you a little better. Is that all right with you? And he'd put you over there. He'd put me over someplace. What was he doing? He was grouping the people together that had like issues, so that he could be talking about, as a result of discovering who you are and you feeling confident in yourself as a person, you can begin to realize that you're more than anything else you would have thought of being before. You can have the kinds of confidence you want. What's he doing? He's gesturing and using commands and suggestions at the group with learning disabilities, while simultaneously talking about repairing things. You know, there was a contractor that was brought in to repair a kitchen. You know, a hole had been knocked out into a wall. It's like the wall had been violated. The kids didn't know what they were doing. They smashed it, but you know, it left the kitchen in shambles. But when a really proficient contractor, there we go, came in, he began to repair this. And what's he doing? He's gesturing at the group of people that were raped. And what are you coming up with as you hear this? What are you understanding as you hear me talk right now?
So what happened and what he was effectively doing, we're going to be talking more about the state of calibration, which is going to be the heart of what we're doing, of really being able to read the group that's in front of you. But if you know the criteria of your group, and you begin talking about the different issues, the different criteria that they are facing, using positive and negative criteria, and you open your eyes and you pay attention to the people, and don't tell them funny jokes, but pay attention to their responses, you are going to be able to visually sort every person in the room into one of the criteria that you have prepared. And then, based on what we're going to teach you with building and persuading, again, unconsciously, you're going to be able to change them, to move them, to take them to where they need to go without ever speaking to them one-on-one, doing all of the change work in the group.
One of the things I'd like you to do right now is, I've hopefully led you to a realization. What is it? Would you write it down right now? What is the realization that you have been experiencing in your mind? What's the realization around criteria? How might you, what's a hypothesis that you might have right now? How might you use criteria in a group, or even with just one or two people, to begin, or a website, or in writing, to be able to get the kind of results you want? Would you write a hypothesis, an idea that you have come to think, wow, maybe this is possible? What is it? Write it down right now, would you?
We're going to pause while you write it down, and as soon as you write it down, we'll be right back here. Hey, we're back. Did you miss us? Did you do your work? Did you write it down? If you didn't write it down, stop the recording, stop the DVD, and go do it. All right. When you are a persuader,
wait
when
a
you're in
second.
sales...
Wait a second. I just want to say something real quick. I know what you're thinking, okay?
I do too.
And you're wondering, what's the point? Hang with us, because you're getting the point, okay? We're wanting to bring this to you in a way that's going to be, I hate it when people say this to me, but I'm going to say it, organic, meaning from the inside out. I want you to have this skill and these knowledges, both of us do, from the inside, in a way that moves you, in a way that you're determining and you're learning as you're getting it. Hang in there with us. You're going to see where it all culminates, and you're going to be real happy.
We've done this before, and we know that the training that we're putting together is really organized and stacked in such a way that everything's building on top of the other, and you're going to see that we keep going to new levels with you. We're going to take you now to the 3 objections that there are in persuasion. No matter what you do, no matter your product, I don't care if you're selling newsprint, I don't care if you're selling trash hauling, I don't care if you're selling cars, jet planes, yachts, or medical services, you know, you're a chiropractor or you're a weight loss consultant, there are only 3 objections that you are going to get. Everything fits into these 3 objections. So pay attention, because we're going to apply what we've learned to these 3 objections. And the 3 objections are:
Can't afford it.
can't afford it, it's too expensive. Number 2,
Want to think about it.
I need to think about it. And number 3 is
Have to talk it over with a spouse, attorney, friend.
partner, business owner,
Right.
whatever. Those are the only 3 you're going to get.
Or let's put it this way. If you can handle all 3 of those, that's 99% of everything you'll ever need. So those are the 3 big ones.
Right, like the ones like, oh my God, I'm going to miss my plane. That's not included, but that's not a typical.
That's probably a think it over.
That's probably a thinking. But chances are your objections are going to fall into those. What to do when you get those is not to do one of the following. Oh, okay, so you need time to think it over. Okay, so after you've thought it over, will you give me a call back in a few days? Don't laugh, because there are a lot of people who think that they're going to get a call back. It's not going to happen. You know, I work with a lot of people who are in learning how to do marketing. And when they learn how to do marketing, the biggest issue is for them is getting the client to persuade. And I can't tell you how many times they call me back and they say, oh, the client's really thinking about it, and thinking about it, and thinking about it. And here it is years later, and they're thinking about it. I'm going to think about it is a no. Okay? I have to ask my spouse is a no. Okay? It's too expensive is a more obvious no. And we want to let you know that every single one of those can be turned into a yes. Every single one of those. Okay?
But before you feel bad, I don't win 100% of the time. Okay? You're going to learn when to fold them, when it's easier to walk away. In other words, and minimally that time is when you are going to go up against a person's values, against what's right for them. For example, if the person genuinely does not have any money, genuinely can't afford it, obviously it's a genuine no. But what Harlan said is right. You can learn to overcome every one of these. Shall we talk about how?
All right, we're going to talk about how. And the answer is making sure that you are speaking to their criteria exclusively. Now, in the last part of this program, we're going to take you, and we're in fact going to give you, in the materials that accompany this, a step-by-step guide on how to do this, where you could be in a coma and still persuade people. People who receive this training are just blown away by it. It's called the C3P4 method. But before we do that, there are a lot of additional pieces that you're going to need. And one of the pieces that we want to do right now is ask you, the first question is, how much of your persuasion, how much of your presentation, how much of your work, how much of your discussion has been presented towards their criteria? If the answer is very little, then I'm not surprised that you got one of those 3 objections, or all 3 of those objections. But the more your presentation is aimed at their highest level criteria, the fewer times you're going to get one of those 3 objections. Okay, but let's assume that you got it. This is the time to bring out their negative criteria. The negative criteria is the question of what are they trying to avoid? Okay? Let's say you're dealing with someone who's a financial advisor, okay? And as an advisor, what would you say the number one criteria that people want, their positive criteria is?
Safety, at least right now, probably.
Safety. Okay, what's
Depending on the client. Safety, but safety is a big one.
Okay, that's fine. What's the number one thing that they're trying to avoid?
Loss. Losing the money they have set for retirement. They don't want it to keep eroding away.
There you go. Okay. So a person has given you the objection of they need to think about it. Okay? The way to move them at that period of time is, now, how is your thinking about it? How is you taking time going to stop you from losing even more money than you've already lost? It seems to me that the economic situation, that the people who are managing or mismanaging your money have really brought about a tremendous loss and cost you a lot of money. And it seems to me that with the sad shape that the economy is in, putting off making a decision, putting off working together is only going to magnify your loss, even putting it off as far as tomorrow. The loss that you have today could in fact be significantly increased if the market makes a hiccup tomorrow. Okay? When you play that and you say it with congruity and with sincerity, you're forcing the inevitable upon them, and you're forcing them to make a decision now.
And let me do it in a little bit of a different way. Same scenario. I say it like this. I had a client the other day who, after going through everything, told me, you know, I'm just tired of losing money. I'm tired of it. And my response to him was this: look, we could look all day long for fault to assign, for blame to level. Okay, we could say it's so-and-so's fault, it's such and such an advisor, or it's beyond our control, it's the market. All of which is nonsense. Because one of the greatest things that my clients tell me is how thrilled they are with how well they are settled, how much we understood about these things, so that today we're not having to react horribly and re-change everything because we had them properly positioned. Did we stop every one of our clients from losing money? No. No. That's not possible. Were we able to significantly maneuver in most cases in such a way as to bring safety and security for our clients? Absolutely. Absolutely. My client said to me, if I hadn't have done what I did with you when I did it, how much worse would I have been even one day, 1 week, or 1 month later? I understood he got it. Do you understand?
Okay. Now, let's say we went back to this master and he found one of these objections. Chances are he would not have concluded that he never really did conclude the session if the person didn't get what they came to him for. What he would do was go into metaphor, which we'll be talking about a little bit later. He would have gone into a story about anything, about swimming across the lake to a camp, taking a sailboat out, or very often he would tell a story about a butterfly, training a butterfly. The bottom line is that in that story, he would reference their negative criteria, so he would protect them by not dealing with the actual situation, but by dealing with the metaphorical situation. So the client feels protected because they're dissociated from their real situation and they're dealing with a metaphorical story which isn't as threatening, but is as effective if you say it congruently.
And for example, there's different levels of metaphor. That's what I just used, was a metaphor. I told about a client, but I said, I made the connection rather clear, rather conscious. Okay, if we go to the level of a butterfly, for example, then we're making it much less consciously aware in the person that we're talking with.
And because it's much less consciously aware, there's much less chance for an objection. Milton Erickson used to do this all of the time, and he called it the My Friend John technique. Now, I don't know if he actually had a friend John or not.
Well, we've all had a friend John, haven't we?
Okay. Especially if you've eaten in a bad restaurant.
Oh, Harlan.
Did I just ruin the recording?
Oh, my goodness. It took me a second there, but all right. That's really good. I like it. All right. Moving on.
Moving on. Yeah.
Moving.
Could you just sit on your stool?
We got to talk about stool coming up here pretty quick.
That's tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay. Folks, when you use your friend John technique, depending on the level of rapport, people don't say, they don't process inside, oh, you're just saying that because. That's not what happens if you deliver it congruently. In some settings, metaphor works real well. In a business setting, when you go into a boardroom on Wall Street and someone gives you an objection and you start talking about a butterfly, they're going to laugh you out of the room. Okay? It's not going to work in that setting. On the other hand, if you use the My Friend John technique or My Company John technique, you have their attention. They are fully listening to what you're saying, and they're going to respond.
In fact, isn't that called a white paper? Isn't that called case study?
Right.
Isn't that the Harvard Review?
Those are the things that you can do to change people. So when you get one of these situations, the thing to do is to push the criteria and, more importantly at this point, their negative criteria, and show them that they are actually bringing about their negative criteria.
All right, I have an exercise. I would like to give people an exercise.
Good, because I was going to give them an exercise.
Well, I'll give one, and then you can give one.
Okay.
So here's the exercise. You have the 4 or 5 people you've elicited criteria from. Some of that criteria was negative. How do you know? Because it moves them away from from something positive. It gets them away from the negative. Okay? I want you to just go through and identify the negative criteria. Put an N by the negative criteria. Then I want you to take the 3 objections that we've given you. Okay? Can't afford it. Think it over. Talk to somebody. Okay? Those are the 3 objections. And I want you to use that negative criteria to overcome or to aim it at each of those 3 objections. So you can get an idea, how does that negative criteria help you to solve it? Now, the first time you do it, just do it bluntly. For example, look, how does waiting enable you to ensure success? Because if the market goes down even anymore and you're in your current positions, you're going to get hit harder. Okay, that's very blunt. I'm telling them this is what's going to happen. Then do it a second time. Do it in using a metaphor. And why not do it using the My Friend John technique? Okay, do it 2 times using the negative criteria to solve each of the 3 problems that each of the 3 groups can have. Now, we'll show you a little bit later on how to apply this early on in the presentation and solve it before it comes up. But right now, I want you to get real comfortable with how this works, how it sounds, and how it feels to you to deliver this.
So you should develop your own reservoir of client success stories and be able, for every objection that you're going to get, you should have a client success story that goes against that specific objection. That's your My Friend John technique for there. Make sure that you're using them truthfully, but you must have them If you've been in business for any period of time, you should have some success stories. Make sure that they're true.
Wait a minute, let me give an idea real quick about how to come up with more.
Okay.
Okay, if you don't have a lot of your own, go to a colleague in your industry and ask for theirs. Then don't say it's yours, just say another example of a client in our industry. Okay, and then tell the story. Okay, but get a list of stories. And this is you know what, before I think I really want to give an exercise on that as well. It's real simple.
Go ahead.
But, well, wait a minute. Do we want to give them a break real quick to do this, or shall I just give the exercise? What would you like to do?
Let's give the exercise.
Here's the next thing you want to do after you finish the first thing that we just talked about, the first exercise. The second thing is, I want you to come up with 3 stories for each of the 3 objections. 3 stories for each of the 3 objections. Understand, this doesn't have to be true in the sense that it happened exactly, although if it did, all the better. But you want to be 100% truthful and congruent by not saying, this happened to a client of mine, but you could say, I heard of a client that this happened, or a friend of mine told me about this situation, if that is actually true. Make sure you're being truthful here. If you're 1 iota untruthful, your client will feel it, and you'll be in trouble. You'll lose the deal. Come up with 3 stories for each of the 3 objections. 3 good stories you can tell. Real short and to the point, but these stories should use the negative criteria that you discovered from your 4 or 5 people that you've already elicited this from. Are you beginning to understand why it's important to do the exercises? So if for any reason you have not done what we've asked you to do up to this point, please do it now. Stop what we're telling you and go do it. And then rejoin us here as we continue on. But for right now, let's take a quick break, and I want you to go do that and then come back. Okay, now you have some stories that use negative criteria to overcome the 3 biggest objections that you can have. What has this done for you? All right, it's done something profound.
Number 1 is, you're not going to be stunned by any of those 3 anymore. You're not going to look there like a fish on dry land, gaping, hoping that somebody's going to throw you back in the water. You're also going to recognize that unless you do something, that's a sale walking out the door that ain't gonna come back to you. I can think of the number of times when I had my hypnosis business and people said all the time, oh, I'm going to get back to you. The number of times that they got back to me out of thousands and thousands of people was probably something like 2 or 3. So if it's something you're counting on, not going to happen.
And when I was young and in selling, it was a joke to call somebody a B-back. If we were working with a salesperson, for example, who said, oh yeah, they said they'd be back. Ah yeah, one of your famous B-backs. Okay. And there is no such thing as a B-back for the most part. However, depending on what you sell, you may have an extended sales cycle. That's absolutely fine. That's a different story. No worries. But now you got 3 stories. You've got stories to handle 3 objections and dealing with negative criteria. You're beginning to see how it's dovetailing. All right, let's go a little deeper. What's another way of saying what you really have here? Well, what you have is a refined intention. In other words, like Harlan said, you're not going to be broadsided one day when you hear this. You're already prepared for it. And there's magic in these words, real magic. Okay? There's magic because you're so prepared that it doesn't matter if you get it. Now think with me back to before you had been exposed to this, before you understood this concept. There have been times in your career where you've been broadsided with something and it didn't feel very good. It knocked you off your game plan. It stunned you, if you will, and it caused you to probably miss the sale. Okay. I want to talk with you for a little bit about intention, because I found it to be one of the most profound and powerful things you can use while putting all of these unconscious persuasion skills into place that'll help organize them, keep you on track, and make things work for you.
And it's very interesting because I'm Kenrick's friend and together with him, and I see him in situations that you wouldn't assume are persuasion situations. Watching him in a store, watching him with a clerk, watching him in a restaurant with a waitress. It's very clear that when Kenrick is in any situation, he does something that he's about to reveal called setting the intention. This, I believe, is the unspoken element of success, because he knows what he wants to get and then he goes for it.
In fact, I've been chastised for it. I've been praised for it. It's an amazing kind of thing. Here's why. If you have an intention and you've decided you're going to go and accomplish it, it's like you move mountains with just that. And what's funny is people call me I'm one of the original out-of-the-box thinkers and all kinds of stuff, but I've never seen myself exactly like that. Okay, I think I probably am, but I've always seen it more like I know what I want, and if I'm not getting it, I change until I figure out how to get it. That's always been sort of the framework I come from. And if that means stepping out of a box, well, see, that isn't exactly right for me, because what is my box? My box is getting my result. And so if that's the box, then yes, that's different than other people's box. So I'm already out of the average person's box, so to speak. I want this to be your box as well. The box is setting in your mind what you want to happen and making it happen. But let me warn you, this is a muscle, and it's a muscle that needs training. It doesn't just happen. It needs training. Okay? So let's talk about how to do this. First of all, setting an intention is easy. Okay? It's simply, what do you want? And you're going to go make it happen. You've decided this is what it's going to be. And if it were that easy, right now you'd be rich, you'd be the greatest persuader on the face of the planet, you might be the president of a country, who knows what you might be, if it were that easy. And I want to tell you, it is that easy. It's just not simple. Or it's simple and not easy, however you want to look at it. But there's a way to learn to do this. I've talked about this before, but I want to bring it home here for you so that you really bring this to play in all of these skills. The first and biggest key is to know what you want. Wanting the sale isn't enough. You have to be much more specific. You have to want to transfer a feeling to your client or bring out a feeling from your client. You have to want your client to feel served, to feel connected to you as an individual, not as a nameless, faceless salesperson. You have to make this client understand that you're bringing something of greater value than the little bit you're asking for. These are intentions worthy of having, because when your client experiences them, they buy. Am I right? Okay. So what stops us from doing this? Well, number one is simply knowing that we need to. Now you know. You need to, okay? So it would be really helpful if you would write out a list of the intentions that you need when you're talking to your clients. I've just given you a few of them. Write them down, write them out, so you know exactly what they are. The next thing you want to do is begin to train yourself to believe that when you set an intention, it's going to happen. Now, this is much easier said than done, but I'm going to give you a foolproof way of doing it, and you'll be able to go out and make it happen. By way of doing it, let me give you a little story. I decided to embark on this kind of way of reasoning many years ago when I was studying stuff that was completely unrelated, at least so I thought, to persuasion. And the author was talking about how to have a will of iron and how to move people without so much as saying a word, and other kind of esoteric ways of thinking. And suggested that the reason that people don't have this is because they don't tell the truth. And I thought that was really funny, because of course I knew I told the truth. until I began to think about it. And I realized, well, I think I fudge an awful lot, like a lot of people do. I'm late for a meeting, and I say, oh my goodness, traffic, horrible. It was just horrible. I mean, wow, it was an accident coming up here, and and what was really the truth? I left late. There may have been traffic too, but I left late. Had I left on time, I'd have been there basically on time. When I realized that, I realized that there was some real power here. What's the power? If you find yourself to be irrelevant, if you find your words to be irrelevant, how well do you believe your unconscious mind is going to do what you're telling it to do? How well do you think you're going to be able to create results when you want to? I'm here to tell you it isn't going to happen. Have you ever supervised someone who's learning to sell? Have you seen them trip all over themselves in the making of the sale or in the losing of the sale? And you think to yourself, oh my God, I could have closed this 5 times already and got the sale. What's this idiot doing? I guarantee for any of you that have been in sales for a while and watched other people, especially newer people, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Well, I used to watch it all the time.
Absolutely. And if you haven't, do yourself a real favor. Go watch a newbie. Spend a presentation or two and just watch and listen. And be willing to offer constructive help when they're done. But I guarantee you what you'll find will shock you. And what you'll find is a person without a spine, without a backbone. Why? Because they're like a fish out of water, like Harlan was just saying. They're gaping, hoping that someone will help them in some way. But of course, you can't really help a person like that. They've got to have a few experiences and learn. And once they do, you can then begin to advise them and show them a better way. Here's the deal. To some extent, every single one of us have this problem with the backbone, unless you've trained yourself not to have it. Every one of us have, through daily living, gotten into habits, ruts, problems, where we don't really say what we mean. Let me give you some examples. Any example that has the word not or don't in it is a good example. I don't want to feel bad today when I go out and go to work because I'm not making enough cold calls. I don't want to feel like I'm not closing sufficiently, but I don't want to make my prospects feel bad. Any of these sound familiar? Okay? Whenever you're talking like that, you're bringing that very thing to you because you're sending a mixed message and your unconscious mind says, I'm just going to do the best I can and hopefully it'll work, and if it doesn't, I'm going to feel bad. Doesn't help you. Doesn't help close anything. So I began this study many years ago, and I did something very simple. I said, first of all, I'm not going to lie about anything. If I'm late, I'm not going to go out of my way to make myself look bad. I'm not going to say, you know what, this morning I slept in. I slept in an hour. And then I took too long of a shower. And, well, I was just lazy. And so I'm here late, I'm sorry. No, I didn't do that. But I didn't go out of my way. I didn't go out of my way to look bad, but I told the truth. I apologize that I'm not here on time. I'm late. If they said, why are you late? Sometimes I'd even tell them, I overslept today, I apologize. And how freeing of an experience that was. I remember once as a little kid, my stepdad, my mom made cookies that I just loved. and my stepdad had a real thing about me eating cookies. As right he should, because I ate too damn many of them. Okay? But he didn't have a very nice way of explaining to me why I shouldn't. He was an ex-military drill sergeant, and he had a way of talking to me much like he would a bad recruit, and it just made me mad. So one night, my mom had made cookies, put them in the cookie jar like normal, and I snuck out to get them. I had my hand in the cookie jar. When my stepdad, who had been waiting for this, came around the corner and said, "Why are you taking that cookie?" And I said, "I'm not." My hand's in the cookie jar. Talk about the classic, right? Okay, I realized that for many people, they're saying the same thing. Their hands are in the cookie jar and they're saying it's not. So I decided to do a little learning, a little test. I decided that one day I would go out and get the mail at 3 o'clock. So I set in my mind, it was in the morning, I don't, whatever time, 9 o'clock in the morning, I said at 3 o'clock today I'm going to go get the mail. Guess what? 3 came and went and I didn't get the mail. The phone rang, I was busy. And when I realized it was after 3, I went, shoot, why did I do that? So I went back. The next day I said, okay, I'm going to do it again. But I'm going to set the time up a little bit. I'm going to go get the mail at noon. No matter what, I'm going to get the mail at noon. But at noon the next day I wasn't there. The phone rang, I don't know, I was busy, same thing. So finally I said, okay, I'm going to give myself something I know I can't fail at. In 10 minutes, I'm going to go out and check the mail. And I looked at my watch, and at 10 minutes, I got up and I checked the mail. It wasn't there yet, but that didn't matter. I checked it exactly when I said I would. But you know, it was grueling. It was grueling because stuff kept happening. The phone would ring. It was like the world, the universe knew that I wanted to do something at 3 o'clock or at 2 o'clock or at 12 o'clock, and it wasn't going to let me. Why? Because I had trained my unconscious mind that what I had to say is irrelevant. And until I changed that, that's how my life worked as well. And for a lot of you hearing me right now, there's a part of you that's going, wonder if that's true for me. And I guarantee you, if you've thought that right now, it is true to some extent. So I want to give you the same exact exercise that changed my life. It's very simple. I want you to agree to do one task at one time frame. And that task is going to be very simple. Go out and check the mail, for example. That's it. Make sure we're recording still. Are we still recording? All right, I'll wrap it up. Go out and check the mail. Give yourself a gradient of 5 minutes to do the task. In 5 minutes, I'm going to do it. Pick something, it doesn't matter. The next day, elongate the task. Give yourself 10 minutes or an hour. But demand of yourself you're going to do it at that moment that you agree to do it. Even if you have to hang up on somebody or you have to cut short a conversation, demand that you do it. The gradient is elongate, elongate, elongate until pretty soon you're doing, in the morning you set a task, and at night you're doing it exactly like you've agreed to do it. Pretty soon you can set the task out a week or a month, or you can write a goal and accomplish it. And I have some very specific ways of doing that too. I don't know if we'll get to it in this class or not, but there's some very easy ways you can draw these things to you. But it starts with you finding your words relevant, with you having congruence 100% at the most profound level in you. Because when you do, and you set an intention, your prospect feels the power of that intention, and it rockets your ability forward. Combine it with the things that we've taught you so far, and you're beginning to understand a lot more about how unconscious persuasion works. What's your thought?
My thought is to be continued.
Perfect.
So do the exercises we talked about, because it will ramp up your skills to levels that you just won't believe.
Good.
See you soon.
Yep.